Hoe laat is het, Rosa?
Shura,
Ja.
kennst mich hören?
Ah,
Kennst
ja,
mich
maar...
sehen?
Ja,
Shalom
very.
Aleichem.
Aleichem sholem.
Welcome, Taira family and friends and passers-by. We're just getting started now on Facebook Live. Welcome to today's episode of A Rabbi and a Yiddish Singer. I walk into a Zoom, and I'm so delighted to be here with my friend and teacher, Shura Lipovsky. Shura, where are you now?
I am in Amsterdam. And I'm in the house of my friend Marjolein van Roon, who is my co-producer, and she helps me with all the technical things, which is not my expertise.
How is it? How are things in Amsterdam now? What is the vibe like?
Well, it's the Corona vibe on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's the vibe of we don't care.
Mm.
So there is two mentalities really not getting along very well, and unfortunately, we have been doing very well in the first wave for the first, and we were disciplined, and you know we even didn't have a total lockdown
Mm-hmm.
because we could trust that people would take distance and keep distance, and and wash their hands and so forth. Meanwhile, unfortunately, there are different theories about this COVID and crazy theories, and unfortunately, the respect for the authorities starts to linger.
Mm.
Yeah. So, but on the positive note, there are always nice people when you walk on the street, and you take into account that you should take distance or keep distance. People
Yeah.
smile at each other and really smile and nod, very friendly, and then make a little corner and go. So there's that as well. The people that do keep the rules are very sweet.
Are people wearing masks now or not?
Yeah, well, we have to since Amsterdam has been now a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
So there are places where there are many people. You're allowed. You have to, and then it's still open. Supermarkets, yes or no. But I think it will change quickly so that it will be obligated more.
Mm.
So, yeah, but the Dutch have a strange idea that masks wouldn't help, which I think is ridiculous. But yeah.
Uh, and so tell us where are you from? Where does your story begin?
Sometimes I don't know myself. Because sometimes I don't know. I mean, yes, in this physical life, I started in The Hague. And with a Russian or Ukrainian father who was born in Kharkov. And they escaped very soon. He was born in 1917, so during the revolution. And they escaped in 1919 and lived in many different countries. In Constantinople, in Napoli, in London, in Berlin, and he ended up in the Alsace. There is where he went to school. And then the Second World War broke out, and he went into the Maquis, in the Jewish resistance, in Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, where he worked together with Trocmé and brought Jewish children over the mountains alone to Switzerland.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's done that the whole time under a false name, Pierre Breton. He brought his parents to the south of France, to Nîmes. His sister, he brought her into a monastery.
Hmm.
And he was in an équipe. The équipe was called Le Sixième, the sixth. And the very last day where they were supposed to meet somewhere, he missed the train. And his whole team was killed right away when they arrived on the spot where they were supposed to arrive.
Wow.
And he was the only one to survive. Yeah. And of course, it haunted him for the rest of his life.
He
Why?
told you he told you these stories when
Yes, he did. He
wow.
did. Yeah. But he was a very interesting person because he was shy also. So there were many gatherings after the war till, I don't know, not even long ago, where the children that were safe would come together and celebrate their heroes. He never went. Very strange. Very strange. But it was, in that time, he felt he could do something. And that was for him, he was all about, helping people. So he had all the characteristics of Elijah the prophet in some sense. The only thing is that he never thought he was good enough, and he suffered from a bad sense of self-criticism, which really is a pity. And my mother was brought up in Holland, and my mother was the person who brought me into contact with Hasidic stories, Yiddish.
Really?
Songs. Yeah.
Did she come from a religious home?
She wasn't Jewish.
Really? So what was her connection to Hasidic stories and the like?
Well, she had always intuitions and deep. When she heard her first Yiddish song, she wept, and she knew it for some reason. And then her story is that I think just before the war, she took a tram always from her house to the Royal Academy, because she was a painter, and she went to the art school, Royal Academy in The Hague. And every day there was a man. She saw a man with a white beard, and he was reading a book. Each day the same book. So they would get into conversation. And they spoke about what the book was about. Deep, deep thoughts, deep conversations. And then one day this man with the white beard told my mother, I will never be back on this tram. You will never see me again. But since our conversations were so deep to me and so dear, I give you the book.
Wow.
And the book was die Urausgabe von Martin Buber's Hasidic stories.
Wow.
Yeah.
That story is a Hasidic story itself.
It is, totally. And my mother was so Jewish in the sense that she would weep. And when I was 13, I started to sing Yiddish songs. I knew this is who I am.
What is? Say a sentence more about this.
Yes, because it's interesting, because I didn't know anyone who spoke Yiddish I didn't know anyone who spoke it. I know one person, Hannah Milner, who published books with Yiddish songs, but she didn't speak Yiddish herself. So I thought it was like Latin. But the song, I started singing nigunim, although I didn't know it were nigunim. So I started singing, endlessly melodies without words. And when, in some sense, sometimes it was in a state of weeping. I wanted to cry, but didn't find the words for it, or the reason. I didn't understand why, so I started singing melodies without words. Then I found a song on the piano in a book, started singing it, and it hit me totally, and I knew this is who I am.
Wow. And how old were you? Were a teenager? You were?
Yeah, I was by that time 13.
Wow.
Turning into 14. And of course I didn't know it's a profession, because hardly people did it at that time. So I auditioned with Yiddish songs and sang Schubert and Schumann and Mozart for the conservatory in Rotterdam with Margreet Honig, the best vocal coach worldwide.
Wow.
And she was so moved because she herself had sang in an ensemble called Collegium Musicum Judaicum by Chaim Storosen, who was a wonderful person, also enormous tzaddik. And she was not Jewish, but she had the same deep connection with Judaism as my mother. So I was taken into conservatory. But at that time, I was very worried that I would not be able to preserve an authenticity in my singing. I was always wondering whether I can still sing Frère Jacques, like, or whether I could sing I was very worried that I would have a too classical voice. So after 1.5 years, I left conservatory.
Because of this.
Because of this. Because I said to Margreet Honig, who I love for the rest of my life, and she's the greatest. And now I will come back to her. I came back to her because now I know I can combine the two. classical. But that's 40 years later. So, but we always stayed in touch. But then I went to Paris. I was invited to Paris to give a concert with Yiddish songs. I still didn't know Yiddish was a spoken language still. So I sang my concert. And then suddenly I saw that people understood the words, although I did not translate certain things.
Wow.
So I was in total shock.
What songs did you sing?
I sang Donna, 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 of course, the Tom Balalaika,
Sure.
the Rabbi Elimelech. I sang all these sort of, and then I sang Zog nicht keinmals de geesten letzten Weg, which was very impressive to me because when I started to explain what it was about, they all rose. It was in a small room, and I sang, and something took over. I mean, it was so deep and so I will never forget that moment. And after the concert, I then thought, well, maybe there's people who understand it, so maybe people. And then I heard for the first time in my life, a Yiddish Wort was op mijn gered, ooit gered. Yitzhak Lipovsky was there, brilliant teacher from Paris. He's from Buenos Aires, but now works for a long time already in Maison la Culture Yiddish, Bibliothèque Madame. So then I knew, I have to learn the language. So I went back to Amsterdam, and as my life goes, I was immediately, soon after, asked to participate in a second generation concert, which was put together by someone called Mira Rafalovic. And Mira Rafalovic did speak a beautiful Yiddish. And then I told her she has to teach me, and she said, I never do that. And then she told me later, which I don't remember, that I have said to her, you don't have a choice.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's history, and now I write my own Yiddish songs in Yiddish. So that's, once I was in St. Petersburg to teach, and then I was asked to give a lecture on the Yiddish language and what I thought of whether it could survive and so forth. And I said, well, listen, I did the whole lecture in Yiddish, telling that I didn't speak it before. So that's the proof that it can survive, of course.
Did your parents ever get to hear you sing in Yiddish?
Oh, absolutely. They were my biggest fans.
Yeah.
No, from very young on. From very young on. And just to finish the story about my mother, and so my mother knew when she was pregnant that she was pregnant of a Jewish child. She always said so. And she
What did that mean? What did that mean to her?
That meant to her, I think that meant to her that she would know my sensitivities, that I would maybe have more than other people in certain directions, which is true. I was in panic when I hear dun, 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 in the streets, or when the sirens would go, I would run home and say, Mama, the war comes again, and totally panic. And we would celebrate Shabbos and all the Jewish holidays with friends. And I was also put in a Waldorf school, which is a Christian school in a sense, because it's a mystical Christian school, but it's about art and about how to live well. And there were 6 Jewish children in my class. And from my 15th on, I sang every Friday night in the synagogue in The Hague as the one and only singer. And in that time was a revolution because I was a woman. And of course, women weren't allowed to sing,
right?
Even by the liberals. But Chaim Rosen thought I should do it. And my mother wasn't Jewish. But something was stronger. And then after 10 years, my Rebbe Dort, the Avram Sutendort, asked me, Shura, shouldn't you become Jewish? I spoke fluent Yiddish already. I said, well, I'll think about it. I was a little upset, and I said, I'll think about it. And then it was really true. 10 years later.
Hold on, wait. Tell us to step into the upsetness for a moment.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you later because
Okay.
Because 10 years later, it was Purim, and I was there in The Hague, and out of the blue, Avram Sutendorp said, So, did you think about it? 10 years later. I said, yes. I'm not becoming something that I am already.
Wow. You said this to him.
Yeah. And then he stroked his beard, looked at me,
Yeah.
and said, I followed you all those days and all those years. You have my signature. For him, who in Holland, the liberals are still very scared and very, you should do it according to the law, etc., etc. And then he said, but in order to fight from within, just let us have a Beit Din, tribunal, where we acknowledge you as Jewish, do a mikveh, and then you can fight from within. I did that because I thought that one I understood. I also said I will always continue to learn, always. I won't do it to prove myself, but it's who I am. Anyhow, so the Beit Din was about to happen. I came into the room. It was I think 1.5 years later. And I saw that Avraham Sutton was like this, and someone else was looking out of the window. They were all very upset. So I said, what's wrong? And they said, well, we just heard that there is a terrorist attack in Tel Aviv. But let's start. So they sat behind the desk. They were liberal rabbis, right? Liberal. So I know why I'm telling you this. So I said, okay, I just heard about a terrorist attack. You're going to acknowledge my being Jewish. I would like to start this by singing Ani Ma'amin. I believe whatever happens.
Wow.
Then,
who's the Rebbe on the Beis Din?
then one of the rabbis said, no, you can do that later. That's not. And I said, I can't. I have to. So I stood up.
This is amazing. Okay,
and
go
I
on.
started to sing Ani Ma'amin. So I believe that Mashiach will come, whatever happens. And within 10 seconds, they all sang with me, and we wept together. And that was almost the Beit Din. Yeah.
Wow, that's such another episode of your life, Shura, that feels like out of a Buber book or like from a Hasidic story in and of itself. But what's so captivating for me in that story is the conviction and fierceness in which you were able to say to him, this rabbi 10 years after that, why would you convert to something that you already are? That sense of identity in your own self growing up, and then but also your transition, or your also understanding of his point of operating from within. I'm curious if you would say a little bit more about what that means to you. Why was that?
Question. I love your questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, in a sense, I didn't want to waste time on arguing whether I'm Jewish or not. And the Rebbe could have this wisdom to see, yes, she's so Jewish. And it's interesting because I once was in New York, and I was in the synagogue of the brother of Shlomo Carlebach. And at those days, I was in love with a Chassid. And then I walked with him up and down the Hudson and speaking about, what if and why and And he told it to the twin brother of Shlomo Carlebach, and he said, well, you have to know her mother's not Jewish. And he said, that's not possible, she's so Jewish. I like to make people understand that the history of the soul is deeper and more of a mystery than the genes. Why did I want to admit that I should have a Beit Din? Because I thought it's too precious, and it's also beautiful, I have to admit, it was beautiful to have this moment with the Rebbes together. And so it was a moment which I wouldn't have wanted to miss, but I said, I'm not going to go into Giyur to prove to you that I'm Jewish.
Right.
No. It's a collective. And then I can, as I told, fight from within. The interesting thing is that my whole halachic Jewish family is Catholic. Because, of course, my aunt, who has been brought into a monastery by my father, came out Catholic. And she married Catholic, and she has Catholic children. And my other cousin, who was in London, who is Catholic, they all were so scared. They didn't dare to be Jewish again. And in a sense, I think most of my whole life has been about bringing people back to who they are over Yiddish culture. And sometimes I had a very dearest friend, Dolly Hein, who was a hidden child. Both her parents were taken away and killed. And she came to a workshop of mine when she was already 60, and I gave a workshop. And then after that workshop, she came up to me and said, could I have private lessons with you? I felt something. I said, yes. Okay. So we started singing, and she had a very small voice. It was really not a singer, very, very small. But I knew it's deeper than deep important that we work. So we continued to sing, and I think the third lesson, when there was a little bit more voice, and I encouraged her to sing in Yiddish, she stopped and started weeping. And said, you know, my parents were taken away because I made noise as a child. And now you invite me to make noise in Yiddish. And feel my soul.
Well, talk about a tikkun, a healing or attempted healing, fixing. Can I ask you another question?
Yes.
You know, the image of arriving at the Beis Din and starting out with singing Ani Maamin. First of all, there's a concept in Hasidus known as like Azut de Kedusha, of having a certain type of holy chutzpah, which I love and admire and think is so righteous and right on for your own story and so much. But I'm also thinking about your own story in the context of being a daughter of survivors and you know your own spiritual DNA that you carry. So what does that song mean to you? You know?
Oh, wow. What a great question again. So, it means so much. And it means, I teach a lot in many circles in Germany, in Switzerland, and wherever, with a lot of non-Jewish people as well. So every time the term Mashiach comes up, immediately there's but he's already there or not, and so forth. So I always say, and I'm deeply convinced that what if Jesus had a spark in him of a Mashiach start, all his first pupils were Jewish. The time of the Mashiach consciousness is not there yet. So we all have to build a new time and create this time of this new consciousness, where I think, you know, at this point where the world is getting totally crazy, more than ever, it's not only my obligation to believe that Mashiach die Gezeiten are on their ways. And it's interesting because I've been a tour guide in the Jewish Museum for a while.
Mm.
And then there's the maquette of the temple, and then I told there was a group of children from Berlin, young children, 8 years. So I said, so you know what it is? Yes, it's a temple in Jerusalem, but it's not there anymore. I said, so what's okay? And do you know what happens when Moshiach comes? Yes, when Moshiach comes, the temple will be rebuilt. And then another child said, but that's not possible because it's a mosque now. And I said, yes, that's now a mosque. So yeah, so maybe not. And then I asked the children, can one of you tell me what Moshiach could be?
Mm.
And then one child says, Moshiach is an angel who speaks in the minds of all the people.
Mm. This was a child who said this?
Yes, but we know that there are young souls and old souls in
Yeah.
so and for me all this what's happening at this point, Black Lives Matter, all the understanding that women are shouldn't be violated, that and there I have to say I adore your work. I admire so
Thank you.
much. For me you are a light in this, because I recognize a soul who is so much fighting in your way for non-violence, for inclusiveness, for understanding, for everything that I admire about Judaism, and I haven't found for a long time.
Thank you, Shura. It means a lot coming from you, because your music for me was in so many ways the soundtrack of so much of my childhood, and your singing and songs. And I'm wondering, maybe now would be a time to maybe we could hear a lead or two of yours if you felt
Okay,
so inclined. But you choose which one and tell us a bit about it.
good. Um, yeah, I've been doubting a lot because I just recently, 2 weeks ago, wrote a song about the moon who's sad that she's immediately forgotten when the sun starts to shine. And then she's angry and she's weeping, and then she talks to the stars, and the stars are angry with her because the stars say, well, listen, that's ego crap. You're beautiful and big, whereas we fall down all the time, and no one weeps about us, and no one honors us. And you should be glad that with your beauty, and that you have a task in this world. So that I can sing, but the other I might want to sing because I don't know how much time we have. Shall I do this one first?
Was du willst, yeah.
Because well, maybe I do a little bit of it.
Okay.
It's up tempo, which usually I'm more for the melancholic versions, but it's I wrote it. I just wrote it, and I wrote it because I also wrote a song which has not yet become a song because I don't have the melody for it yet, about the sun who is always conscious that she's looking at her own image when she's shining, even though she's shining on mountains and seas and so forth. And she's so enchanted with her own image that, in fact, then when clouds come and when she has to hide, that's a whole new world for her, where when she feels that she can hide for a while and she doesn't have to shine all the time, she can sing from within and develop another side. Of course, this is all about yin yang and male and female and so forth, and which can be, not only men are male and women are female, but
Of course. Energy.
Energy. Okay, but this is about the moon, who is sad that she has to disappear. Telefone bedeckt ihr Schmeichel, wie bald die Sonne entbleckt ihr Schein. Keiner will doch nicht verschwinden oder gar unnützlich sein. Wenn sie still in ihr kleinen Winkel, wo kein Mensch erwischt ihr Träer. Etwas sagt sie, ist mir treurig als silbrig Licht, ist mein Bagger. Tudi, tudi, tudi. Tudi, 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 tudi. tu. In der Nacht bin ich der Redes, was vielleicht dem Podel schier. Kommt die Sonne und Mensch vergessen, als aushebt sich an mit mir. Tu-di-tu-di-du, tu-di-tu-di-du-du, di-du-di-du-di-du-di-du. Führt sie weiter mit ihr Klodden zu die Sternen weit und kalt. Wie die Sonne kommt sie verjoggen und verwischt ihr Blassgestalt. Und wenn ihr die weite Sternen, sei nicht treurig, du bist Greus. Keiner wird dich nicht vergessen, weil du sehst doch prächtig aus. Tu-di-tu-di-du, tu-di-tu-di-du, tu-di-tu-di-du-di-du-di-du. Tu-di-tu-di-du-di-du-di-du. Wir aber seien klein und nichtig und fahren oft weg ins Stäub. Keiner weint, wenn wir verschwinden und keiner singt uns nicht kein Leub. Du habst sich ein von der Heb und Straden mit dein silbern Pony im Fein und wisch ab jetzt deine Tränen und gedenk dein silbern Schein. Okay.
Bravo.
It's just well, 2 weeks ago. So, and the song before that, which I've written I think a month ago or so, speaks about a concept which is important for me about angels. And maybe, you know what? Maybe I start with the song that I dedicate in this case to you. And then I sing the lullaby after that. So then I've sung 2 songs. The song which I dedicate to you is Schämt sich der Malach. I wrote this song when I couldn't deal anymore with Assad, who's killing his own people, Putin continuing to kill, and the wars all over all the time. And then so it continued also with the plane being shut down with 200 Dutch people in it, and Israel being in war all the time. I just suffered. I couldn't stand it anymore. So, schämt sich der Malach, als ist nicht da, wenn teure Menschen verschwinden in Grau. The angel is ashamed that he's not there when dear people, wonderful, precious people, disappear in the dark, are killed. Now he or she needs another angel to be reminded of his name and his task, because as we know, Raphael is a healer, Refuah and Micha and so forth. So the name of the angel is also the identity, but it helps so much if an angel meets another angel, because people that keep the spirit are like spiritual fighters in some sense. We can get discouraged very easily. And since angels, as the Kabbalah says, are many angels clothed in flesh, which are human beings, who have decided to help, they need other angels. They need other people to help them remind of their task. So you, for me, are someone who, as a Rebbe and with everything you're doing, all the time, putting the light on people in a very deep, caring way, for me is very inspiring, and I can't tell you how.
Thank you.
Schämt sich der Malach, als ist nicht da, wenn teure Menschen verschwinden in Grau. Etwas weht in seine edle Brust und es klippert Tränen und es weht wie Brust, bedarf allein, als Malach soll kommen und bringen ihm Trost und ermahnen sein Nomen, Artikeln ihm geben, weil keiner versteht, wie Malach muss leiden, wenn kommt und zu spät. Bedarf allein, als Malach soll kommen und bringen ihm Trost und ermahnen sein Nomen, Artikeln ihm geben, weil keiner versteht, wie Malach muss leiden, wenn kommt und zu spät. Schämt sich der Malach, als ist nicht da, wenn teure Menschen verschwinden in Grau. Etwas du weint in seine eigene Brust und es klebt a Tränen und es wehtigt der Pust. Bedarf allein, als Malach soll kommen und bringen ihm Trost und ermahnen sein Nomen, Artikeln ihm geben, weil keiner versteht, wie Malach muss leiden, wenn kommt und zu spät. Yes, and I think
I was going to say these songs, they're so tief. They're like pirush, they're like midrashim almost on midrash are these sort of mythic type of stories of the rabbi. These are like your modern midrashim, seeped in your own experience, but also for the first song I was thinking about, there's actually a midrash, there's a rabbinic legend about when Avram is first trying to find God, right? And he sees the sun and he assumes the sun is God, but then the sun sets, right? And it's the moon, so he assumes the moon is God, but the moon, and so the star, and he goes, it's sort of like a poetic mirroring in your own voice, in your own way. It's such a powerful tool to stay engaged, as you talked about feeling disengaged from in Jewish spaces, but it's such a powerful personal way to be engaged with the tradition.
thank you so
So
much.
thank you for that.
It's very deep what you're saying, and I'll take it with me as a blessing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was because I speaking of blessings, I wrote a lullaby, which I then, as the last thing, my thing, which for me is a blessing. And but before I do it, I would love to ask you, I suppose, do you remember the first time when you gave a blessing to someone?
The first time I gave a blessing to someone, consciously,
Yes. Interesting.
right? Because I think I'm aware now with my own children what even though I have a teacher who says children are not they're not your naches machines. They're not there to produce your own prideful joy. They're souls, their own precious souls that you have a privilege to usher through the world, and I deeply believe that. But I think about the inherent naches they give, say, my parents or grandparents, and so I think there's something blessing like in that a child offers, particularly for survivor families. First bracha I gave, I have to think about this more.
Good. But then maybe not the first, but what do you feel when you give a bracha, a blessing?
And then we'll go back to you.
Yeah.
It's a giving over, a little bit of my soul, of my neshama. I think in order for a bracha to permeate, for a blessing to really permeate into another person's soul, it needs to come from my own soul and deep place. So it's a sharing of yearnings, of hopes, of longing, of dreams, but from a deeply personal place in conversation with another, of course.
How beautiful.
Why do you
You know,
ask?
because I was thinking about a Rebbe, because for me, you have this deep Hasidic soul, a deep Rebbe, an alter Rebbe from long time. And then I was thinking that that kind of Rebbe, in fact, is a healer.
Mhm.
And then I came off on
Mm.
this blessing, which was
My I was at, it was last summer already. It's hard to imagine, but I was in Ukraine and visiting with Rabbi Art Green, who's a professor of Hasidic thought, and we were visiting the matzevas and graves of different Hasidic thinkers and writers and teachers, and it was this profound experience, to be there with them, with Rabbi Art and his chevra, but also to be at these places. And it was hard to connect because it's I connect much more with their svarim than I do cemeteries, than I do sort of the idols of their remembrances. But I feel very connected to that part of the tradition.
yes.
um, I think
It's
you are.
interesting.
I think you are. I think you are too.
Yes, very.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting
What?
because I have been with a Rebbe, Hannah Nathans, and myself as sort of a magid, whatever, healer. We've gone once to Ukraine and once to Poland to visit graves of.
Yeah.
So, and it for me it was interesting because we went to Rabbi Yitzhak Berditchevel,
Sure.
and I felt a very modest, very light energy,
Hmm.
and with the Baal Shem Tov, of course there were many people, so it was much too busy.
Yeah.
But I felt that I started to pray for mankind in a very, very, like I couldn't choose what to do. And then we went to Nachman and Bratzlavel,
Yeah.
and I started to pray for myself, and all my tzoras and my this and my that, and such and such.
Yeah.
It was for me. So I so much understand what you mean, because if you we had the fortune to just stand for a long time very close to the grave, very very close, so you could feel start to feel the energy.
Well, what you're describing also in terms of your own experience there is also sort of the ethos of who those rebbes were in their
Yes,
own way, in terms of the
yes.
Baal Shem Tov's expansiveness and you know
And
uh,
which I didn't, what I really, I mean, I didn't think it would be, yet I couldn't imagine what it would be for me. I never went on pilgrimage, it wasn't my thing.
right.
Not at all. I thought, well, I don't know, we'll do it, but I don't know why, in a
Right.
sense. Because for me, the stories are more, as you're saying, the books
Right.
and the stories are the real encounters.
Right. And the songs, and yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I have to say, it's interesting because even in some book, Elie Wiesel says, well, we don't even know whether the Baal Shem Tov really existed. It's a mythical figure, and standing near his grave, we know he did. And
Yeah.
in that sense, it sort of empowered me. And but of course, the stories are the soul.
Right.
Of
Right.
course, yeah. So, shall I sing this one more
Please.
lullaby? Good.
Please.
So this is meant to be a blessing. And it's for a girl, but it can be for a boy as well. My beautiful girl, your beautiful son, your mother will sing you to sleep, and and she thinks of tomorrow and looks at you with pain, and she asks your angel to be with you. And your angel's wing starts to shiver when you open your eyes with such joy and you say you're ready to live. And your eyes, your beautiful eyes, enchant the angel so much that he starts to dance in his flight. And then he starts to bless you. And he says, your golden heart will always be happy, and you will always be blessed with joy and light. And if you get lost for a moment, my child, remember the way your angel looks at you and the way your mother sings. And in that way, you will spread joy and happiness, and your destiny will look like the beauty of your angel's wings and what he's wearing. And yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, for me, lullabies, I think, are in some sense the heart of Yiddish culture. It's the most intimate. Yet there are stories of every period within lullabies. And you can bless, and the mother can be afraid, and then she gets herself back to sense, common sense, and she wishes good things. So it's like prayer for me.
I think of your recording of Eilulu Nacht und Regen.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mijn taaier meder, als ohne de Gorfeins, mein prächtig Äußer, dein Mann wiegt dich ein. Ihr warm Herz, alle klappt vor dir, mein Kind, sie singt ein Lied, wo sie wiegt dich wie der Wind. Ihr warm Herz, alle klappt vor dir, mein Kind, sie singt ein Lied, wo sie wiegt dich wie der Wind. Sie tracht von morgen und guckt auf dir mit Pein und bett dein Malche, sie wird bei dir sein. Dein Malchs Fliegen zittert Asch von Fred, wenn du öffnest deine Augen und strahlst im Zug bin gerät. Dein Malchs Fliegen zittert Asch von Fred, wenn du öffnest deine Augen und strahlst im Zug bin gerät. Dein Bläusch in Egele verkischeft ihm bald ganz und lost sein Malachs Flieh verchollend wie in Tanz. Zu dein Gäulschein und schmeichelt zart dir zu und in dem Lachen seins bencht dich mit Ruhe. Seht ein Gäulschein und schmeichelt zart dir zu und in dem Lachen seins bencht dich mit Ruhe. Dein golden Herzele wird mit lichtig sein. Du bist von Itzteron gebencht mit Fried und Schein. Und heut verblanchen bist du einmal mein Kind. Der Monen wirst du Malchs Blick und Mame, der wo singt. Und heut verblanchen bist du einmal mein Kind. Der Monen wirst du Malchs Blick und Mame, der wo sie singt. So wirst du, wo du nur gehst, versprechen Glück und Fried. Und wird ein Geurleus sein wie dein Malchs Kleid. Was soll bist du, wo du nur gehst, versprechen Glück und Fried. Und wird ein Geurleus sein wie dein Malchs Kleid.
Brava.
You know what you just spoke about Eilulu Nacht und Regen.
Yeah.
And you know that this was a very, 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 very important and deep concert for the 50th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which I was invited for, and then I invited your father, Zalman Molotek, and Jeff Warschauer, so piano and guitar and mandolin. And it was
In Warsaw?
In Warsaw, yeah, yeah. It was one of the most deep and yeah, we all shivered, and it was live on the Polish radio.
Wow.
Yeah. And I insisted on, because at a certain point they said, well, we can't afford to have translation because, you know, it's too difficult and so and so. So I said, well, it's not possible. I'm not coming if it's not translated because the songs are so beautiful. And you can't do it to the writers, and you can't do it to the subject. I mean, if it would be love songs, okay, fine. But if it's about the Shoah, you can't have just wonderful melodies and then people thinking, oh, isn't it a nice song, and not knowing what it's about. So I said, no, you have to find one. And of course, they found someone. And Zalman flew that day from New York, and Jeff, and I came from Amsterdam. It was in the Warsaw Philharmonia, filled with Hoge Venster, so important people, but also filled with children from Israel who did the March of the Living, filled with the survivors who are still there. Then live on the radio. So the moment we started to perform, you felt that it was more than a concert. It was, in a sense, you know, praying for all the souls or all the people. And I also wanted to, I thought about it a long time, and I wanted to be at a concert in the first third of the concert to be songs about suffering and, you know, Alululu, Nacht und Regen. Yes, what do I see? People, masses, Jewish people being, you know, chased like dogs. And so one third of suffering, one third of the concert, songs about resistance, partisan songs, female fighters. And then the last third of the concert, songs for peace and for hope. And as you know, at the end, I also sang Eli, Eli, God, may the human prayer always continue to exist. And I dedicated to Bosnia-Herzegovina, because at that time there was that war going on. And then we sang with a whole Sag nicht keinmal the Geisten letzten Weg. Never say it's our last path by Hirschklick. And I asked people to stand up. And it was this big, big hall in the Warsaw Philharmonia, and you heard all these chairs. It was like, and then we sang. Sag nicht keinmal the Geist. I mean, it was deeper than deep. And then anyway, it was such an impressive moment, so that I decided years later to make a CD out of this. And the interesting thing is that a friend of mine from Berlin helped me, Bertram Nicolai, to find a label. That label, this doesn't exist anymore, Extra Platte, found a designer in Germany. And when I got the booklet, almost ready to be published, I saw all horrible pictures of dead bodies and all we know, possible, terrible. So I called him and I said, no, this is not what I want. This is not how I have thought of this. And then he said, in German, but you know what it's about. I said, yes, I do. But I have composed the concert in the spirit of the writers. And in the spirit of what Yiddish revival, what our Yiddish culture is about. To always continue to dream about better times, to always continue to celebrate beauty, to celebrate courage, to celebrate poetry, So those souls are are more, and those minds, I want to dedicate the concert to those people and not to the violence that killed them.
Mm-hmm.
We had to fight so much until I had to say, well, it's either happening like the way I wanted or not. So finally, he agreed. And then a week later, I had a concert in Germany. And after the concert, the public was together, and I wanted to check what people thought.
Mm.
So I asked, what should I do? These pictures, and what should I have done? Because I decided.
Mm-hmm.
The organizer of the concert said you should absolutely have left those terrible pictures in it, because otherwise it will all happen again. And then he said it in a terrible way, which was violent, but well meant. And then there was one woman who said, of course you don't want to have these pictures in it. You want to remember your beloved ones in their beauty. You don't want your family to be portrayed like that.
Mm.
She hit the essence.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that the kavone, the intention in which we all work to rebuild something which is always in love and respect for those who fought. Buddhism was even, the Buddhists believed so much in a righteous world in Eastern Europe. Even during the war, they didn't give up.
It's the way you're describing it reminds me of what we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, which is this idea of, spiritual resistance, and you titled the CD, right? If I'm not mistaken, Heroes and Poets, right?
Yes.
And often when we think of heroes, right, or we think of resistance, that we think of the armed resistance, we think of the uprisings, but we don't necessarily think of this other category, which is just as powerful, if not more so in different ways, which is to maintain one's humanity, the essence of one's humanity, to still sing and create music and art. And you do that, Shura, as a spiritual activist, basically, with these songs. And so I thank you for coming on and sharing a little bit of your work and creativity with all of us.
I thank you. As I told you, I don't know. It's always important to have someone in your mind when you feel weak or vulnerable, and then or angry, because of course we all get angry sometimes. And then to no, there are different answers. No. It's always this Hasidic thought, which I think is what you're living as well very much, is not to focus on bad and evil and violence and so forth. We don't say that it doesn't exist. No, we're not crazy. But we focus on something else. So we don't fight evil, but we strengthen the light by, always trying to find a pintele licht somewhere. I see that when I read what you're writing on Facebook, and in the moments of difficult encounters, how you deal with it.
Mm.
And I know that, I have to say, I'm in such worry about the United States. I can't. I am weeping.
Mm.
And yesterday was a moment of hope when we had this new team on. But I'm very, very worried, and I know that your lives all. You're asked to keep the spiritual resistance very, very much, and I just keep my fingers magwendoveted.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. No, I really, and
Yeah.
I just know we have to all help each other in not giving up. Whatever is the outcome of the elections, we can't give up.
Mine.
Mine, Zelo.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I ask you? No, maybe not. Can I ask you one very personal question?
Oh, okay. I'm just going to quickly end before you can ask me. Okay, fine, sure, ask.
Yes, yes. Um, is prayer for you something that helps against fear?
Um, it's a powerful question. It's a leading question. It's a powerful question. It's a leading question a little bit. But you know, um, I've had my own my relationship with prayer and davening and tefillah is evolving. It's not a static one, and now, with a little baby at home, often I think of my interaction with him as prayerful, in
Oh, yes.
and of itself. But um, certainly the sense of we talked about earlier also before we started recording, the sense of loneliness and isolation that people are experiencing. And I remember when I was in Ethiopia once for a summer when I was in college and I was davening, I remember on the one hand feeling like, and I was isolated from community, and I noticed that all of the words, from the siddur were in plural, and I said, you fool, this is why you're meant to daven with a minyan in a kahila around people. But then in my more hopeful moments, I said, no, this is the power of prayer, which is wherever you are, not only are you connected with God, with this greater force, but you're created with the plural, with those who are saying those words wherever they may be. So I think I find prayer to be a powerful combatant towards fear, but depends how terrified I feel.
Yeah, but does it help you if you say, help me against terrible illnesses or against this or against that? Or,
I don't see it as, certainly there's an element of bakasha, of request, of pleading,
yes.
that's not my relationship to prayer as much as it's more reflective, um, but meditative, hopeful, but no, I don't see it as much of like, here's my laundry list.
Exactly. I love
Why?
it. And yeah, but I also feel sometimes that if you say, look, help this person, but this person is not, help that this person is not get very ill and not get this and that, I think it's even negative. I think you should not say negative things in order to heal the person. I think you should say, what you wish for the person good or for yourself. And then, yes, the question is whether we have our wishing list, whether it makes sense, or whether singing a lullaby or a nigun without
Yes,
people.
yes. Well, that's what I think that's such a powerful model, right? Which is to
It is.
expand what we mean by prayer and I find your songs to be tefillos, to be collection of prayers, midrashim too. But
Oh, well.
so soll sein gebencht und stark. Thank you for
Uh-huh.
coming on and sharing a little bit of your neshama and soul with us today.
Thank you so much. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. Amen.
Oh mine, oh
Thank
mine.
you so much, Avram. And I wish you all the light that you spread for your own soul as well.
Thank you. Oh mine. Thank you, Shura.
Danke so.